To my brothers, are you working harder than usual? Do you find yourself stressed? Or you just simply need a rest? Where you can unwind and have an open discussion of well-being, self-care, or simply just being a man in today's world. And join me on November 12th at the Charleston House, 120 East Avenue, where you can take off that professional hat, have a sip or two, maybe a puff, cigar, of course. I'm your host, Ra, at the Fatha Torch podcast, where we advocate for the fathers mentally, physically, emotionally. Being a father is rough and it's hard, but it's even harder when you don't have self-care. So come on down to the Charleston House, November 12th, Fatha Torch, be the dad you wish you had.
Jazzcast Pros.
With depression, it has a nasty stigma with it, right? Because most people think depression means you're weak, right? You can't handle it. You're not man enough. Speaking on emotional intelligence, it's a powerful tool. And we often forget about our emotions because we speak on spiritual, we speak on mental to a degree, we speak on physical, but double talk it. But we never truly speak on our emotional, especially as men.
Generally, for like the feminine or women, it's a little bit easier. Like the way that they relate to one another, they share things on their heart in ways that men don't do that generally, right? Like we don't generally sit down and have a heart to heart. So like that stuff builds, and it builds day after day, week after week, month after month. From what I understand in my experience counseling people, and from my own experience with depression, mm-hmm. I can tell you that like connecting with yourself either through art or with another person can be just the beginning of figuring out how to handle some of this, you know?
Absolutely. But it's hard to do that when we were conditioned as men in this society to be like, not only do we not share as much as women, but we shouldn't share as much as women.
One of the things about depression that's so hurtful is that it makes you think that you alone are suffering and you're suffering alone.
Oh, yes.
And when you get into community, you realize you're not the only one.
Welcome to Fatha Torch, the podcast to help you, the new and renewed fathers, cope with anxiety and stress of fatherhood so that you can be the father or the dad you wish you had. I'm your host, Ra, founder of Abimelech Foundation, an artist and a father of 9. My mission is to help you reclaim your power and ease your minds or ease your concerns about being a father in today's social climate. Today's episode, is he just dumb or is it something deeper? I have 2 guests today, 2 important guests. One is Carl Binger, the podcast survivor in depression. And I have Joel Lesser. He's another podcaster of Unrevealing Religion podcast.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
You're in.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and give you a round of applause as you came on through. Give you a round of applause. You came on through, man. You came on through. How are we feeling, Joel?
Feeling real good now that we got that taken care of.
Well, let me introduce Carl. Joel, Carl.
Hey, Carl. Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you, Joel.
I'm a huge fan or advocate for mental health and depression, especially in the Black and brown men and men in general. So I draw you 2 brothers here, you 2 fathers and men here to better discuss and better to have these conversations about depression, especially in our men and our fathers. And I wanted to try to do this, do this discussion and eliminate the taboo and dismiss these myths of what depression looks like, what it sounds like, the symptoms, the everyday. So, gentlemen, introduce yourselves and tell the world who you are.
Well, thank you. As Rasha Kim stated, my name is Carl Binger, and I am a licensed mental health counselor in New York State. I do a podcast called Surviving Depression. I'm a therapist, so I have my own private practice. And I also wrote a book called The Progressive Darkness for the Christian Losing Hope in Depression. And I wrote about my experience with depression and how I eventually came out on the other side of that. I do have a Facebook group that's private for anyone struggling with depression. It's a supportive Facebook group of about, I think, 600 to 700 members now. And I am happily married to my wife, Carissa. Yesterday made 9 years, and we have 3 sons, ages 7, 5, and almost 2.
Congratulations. That one deserves an applause. Let me go ahead and put that in there. Let me go ahead and put that in there. He said, happily married. That's what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Mr. Joel. Your turn.
Thanks, Rod. Nice seeing you, Carl. So my name's Joel Lessies, and I host a podcast called Unraveling Religion, which is about spirituality, mysticism, psychology, and what is shared in our human experience. I, like Carl, am a counselor. I'm a rehabilitation counselor and have a private practice as well under the AGs, the guise of Education Training Center, which does individual and group counseling and puts on workshops and seminars. I also run Ground and Sky Poetry Series, which is a monthly poetry series that has no mic, no list, no podium. It's organic discussion of life through poetry with sort of my contribution to build sacred community. It's built in trust. It's a very trusting kind of round table or circle, and a lot of good stuff comes out of that. My work experience is in education, psychology, and counseling for people who are sort of marginalized by trauma, addiction, and psychological distress, and the effects of those things, including incarceration, homelessness, and institutionalization. And I'm really dedicated to reframing mental health distress or mental illness is a potential marker, spiritual marker of a gift, like a certain sensitivity that can be with a shifted narrative that people have a gift or a sensitivity that is nurtured can be beneficial to our community and to the individual. So,
all right. And that one deserves a clap. I think I made a great decision of putting you two guys together and having this conversation and breaking down these barriers of which most of us don't know or have a vague understanding of what depression is. I'll start with you, Carl, and Joe, you can jump in anytime. What are some of the things about depression that most of us don't know?
Well, before I start, I do want to say, Joel, man, that everything you do, man, just sounds excellent. And I can't wait to connect with you and talk about some more of the things that you're doing. It's well needed. And Rasha Kim, you shouldn't sell yourself short because you're making a huge contribution to just one, by having this conversation, but two, by all the other things you do as well.
Thank
and
you.
So as far as depression goes, I mean, I think there's many things that people don't know outside of, the clinical realm and just in our communities. There are very fundamental, simple things that people just kind of pass off as this is just normal and I need to just deal with it. And so they don't take it really serious until it's really bad, or even when it's really bad, they don't maybe necessarily take it serious enough. And it's a lot of times due to lack of education. It's symptoms in general. It's symptoms, maybe it's resources. When I was going through it myself, I didn't know what depression was. Like, I heard about it and I was like, oh, it's just when people are sad and it's probably the result of someone passing away in their family or a big traumatic event. So it was like, if I could point to one thing, I think it's people think it has to do with something happening in your life. Depression has to be because something happened to you. Someone died, you got into a car accident, you had a brain injury, you broke up with your girlfriend, like something happened in order for you to feel that way. People rarely think it's like genetic or a chemical imbalance where it comes upon you at some point and you can't necessarily point to a situation, but it's actually a chemical imbalance.
That is a new way. I even myself, I didn't hear in that fashion. Wow. What do you think, Joe?
I agree with all that Carl said. And I feel like from a spiritual standpoint, it's kind of like, I know from my own experience and from a spiritual standpoint that a lot of times it's about connection. It's about a lack of connection. It's about, not talking about what is deep in our heart, and that builds and builds and builds. And then suddenly we realize we're just not feeling ourselves, or we're not feeling the same. And I think like that really just talking to a trusted friend or a trusted counselor can sometimes really take care of a lot of the depressive symptoms. Sometimes other things are necessary, but sometimes not.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing is that it's not from one source or one element versus another that can trigger such a feeling or emotional response, I should say, called depression. I know I struggle with depression, and it's not always based on what someone made me feel or what I've gone through. Sometimes it could be unrealistic expectations. It can be something as simple as not feeling 100% of you, right? You're going through life and you coast. You coast through your pain, you coast through your struggles, but you never deal with it. And with depression being that it has a nasty stigma with it, right? Because most people think depression means you're weak, right? You can't handle it. You're not man enough.
Yeah.
And especially not men, they don't always address it, right? It gets kind of sticky from there because we don't often know all the signs that deal with depression. Like Carl said, we get the trending symptoms, right? Sadness, withdrawal, right? We fall under these umbrellas, but we don't talk about the everyday and even the natural depression that happens that we don't often speak on.
Yeah.
We don't speak on these things.
I think if I could just say, Ra and Carl, generally for like the feminine or women, it's a little bit easier. Like the way that they relate to one another, they share things on their heart in ways that men don't do that generally, right? Like we don't generally sit down and have a heart to heart. So like that stuff builds, and it builds day after day, week after week, month after month. From what I understand in my experience counseling people, and from my own experience with depression,
mm-hmm.
I can tell you that like connecting with yourself, either through art or with another person, can be just the beginning of figuring out how to handle some of this,
Absolutely. I 100% agree, Joel. One thing I've been pushing on my clients and people I've encountered in ministry or just in Wegmans, just
mm-hmm.
everywhere I've gone and talked to people since my experience with depression and even before, I've recognized the power of journaling. And I'll never forget how it started. My friend, I stayed over at my friend's house in Buffalo. I think fresh out of college, I just stayed over with him and his wife. And I saw on their fridge, they had a list of things that they were thankful for. And I was like, do you guys do this every day? He's like, every morning, my wife and I write down what we're thankful for. And we try to write down things throughout the day. And I said, that's pretty cool. And so I kind of took that practice with me, and it turned into not just writing down what I'm thankful for, but also processing my thoughts, writing down what I'm afraid of, what I'm happy about, what do I hope will happen in the next couple of years with my life, and just really creating that extended internal dialogue, not just within my mind and body, but out on paper. And then I think just naturally over time, as Joel is talking about the positivity of relationships, I've seen that over time. It's like the more vulnerable we are in getting down to the root of what we're feeling
mm-hmm.
and expressing ourselves in a safe way, it deepens who we are and it helps other people as well. But it's hard to do that when we were conditioned as men in this society to be like, not only do we not share as much as women, but we shouldn't share as much as women. Because if you start to do that, then you are in fact a woman. And so I've seen the benefits of it, and I try to encourage people all the time. Like, you got to find a medium to where you can put this stuff on paper, on a whiteboard, talking with a friend, talking in a group, poetry, writing music, singing. Like, if you put it out there and you start to engage in this aspect, you're actually going to benefit from it very deeply,
It is beneficial to have these things. However, we don't have the space, nor are we taught to do that, right? And it's often a double-edged sword when it comes to such things. Yes, we should be vulnerable with one another to the degree that to let out or to discuss or even just to have someone listen outside of our own box, right? But we don't have that because we have, like you said, Carl, we have a society that has given us a reality that is so distrusting and disgusting at the same time.
Yep.
We can't even have that one piece of moment of healing because we're always on the grind of something. We're always on the move, and what's expected is not necessarily unrealistic, but is unjust. Right? It's unjust because the only time you're gonna get rest is when you're dead.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality. That's the message. Hidden, subliminal music is everywhere, right? And I love the fact that Joe talked about poetry and you talked about the journal. And it's still a form of art, right? And expression. But we don't have enough of that because now, even more so, we put $1 to it. So your healing has a cost, right? Yep. Your self-care has a cost. So if you're not a booming artist or you're not a trending artist, your healing becomes another stress factor.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because capitalism has taken over everything, even as something as self-care.
Yeah.
Rob, that's so true. And I think one of the things that I'd like to say real quick is just, one of the reasons why I do the Ground and Sky Poetry Series in the Roundtable, I say this, that curiosity is the invitation and there's no charge to it. I don't make any money from it. I don't charge anything for it. It's all sort of an organic reach just for people to get together. And what poetry does, Carl and Ra, is that for me, it opens up there's what we can normally talk about in conversation. Mm-hmm. But when you throw the spear of poetry in that, it pierces that and shatters it. And then you open up the terrain to like, what's really going on for people. Who have you lost, or like what losses have you suffered, or what are you enduring, or what has happened to you, and people write about this in poetic ways through poetry. And then what you discover is that you're not alone. So you think like one of the things about depression that's so hurtful is that it makes you think that you alone are suffering and you're suffering alone. Oh, yes. And when you get into community, you realize you're not the only one.
Absolutely. That is so true, man. Yeah. It's so true. It always makes you feel you are alone. It's kind of like a domestic dispute, right? Or a situation, right? I withdraw you from what can heal you, right? But you're doing it to yourself in this regard, right? You withdraw from everything that remind you of you, and you feel alone, so there's no hope, which can lead to so many other things. I mean, the fathers that I see and fathers that I interact with, I myself could say, yes, they're struggling with depression. However, what type of depression is a different story. And the fact is that I cannot diagnose them, but I do put them on the awareness that, you're struggling. It's okay. It's okay. There's people like you, and there's people that's in front of you. I myself who struggle with this very same, I should say, feeling, but not so much situation, because your trigger might be different from what triggers me. And I try to give them a sense of belonging so they don't feel that they're alone, but it's still up to them to want to seek help.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah, no, it
what do you
makes
guys
sense.
think?
Yeah, very much, Rob.
Yeah, you gotta seek help. One of the, I guess, phrases I coined is like, people always say like misery loves company. And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I get that there might be some real miserable people out there who just are toxic and don't like other people. I said, but when it comes to depression, it's not that misery loves company. It's misery yearns for empathy and understanding of what we're going through and what they're going through. And so I think people, they think of toxic people that they've met in their lives.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that person's just so depressed and a Debbie Downer. And then they project that onto people who's actually going through depression. And they say, well, misery loves company. And it's just like, nah, man, like with clinical, like depression, it's like you just really want someone to understand you on the deepest level because you feel so alone. And just you have to get that help though. You as hard as it is with motivation, especially, you have to push yourself, and other people around you, if they're there, have to push you as well, because it is like climbing a Mount Everest with no clothes on at times. You just by yourself. Mount Everest, no equipment whatsoever, and it seems like an impossible task.
So let me ask you guys, how is it important for treatment such as medication, talk therapy, workshops, right? Art? How important is that when it comes to depression, or do you feel that is something that's forced upon people that doesn't necessarily take it well?
I think they can all be very important. I know for me, from my own personal experience, from talking to other people, I think every person is unique, and what works for me may not work for you. So even in a Facebook group, when I talk to people about this, I think at one point someone said to a struggling member in the group, you should just smoke weed. It's like, that happened at a barbershop talk too, by the way. I told people before the talk, I said, someone inevitably is going to come in here and say, man, you need to just smoke some weed. And sure enough, 40 minutes into the talk, somebody said, man, you need to just smoke some weed. And the whole barbershop erupted in laughter. Like, oh my God, he just said that, Joe. He just said that. And I'm like, I told you, because especially in the hood, where that's like, people deal with a lot of their problems by just smoking and drinking, listening to music, smoking and drinking. And it's like, that doesn't help. Like it may help some people, like in a sense that if someone is dealing with depression and they smoke weed, it might help them temporarily. It would, but telling someone to just smoke weed would be equivalent to me telling someone to just go on meds, because medications might not help some people, medications have helped me. I've been on medications since 2007, and they've helped me the entire time. But that doesn't mean I'm going into every situation saying just go on meds. So I wouldn't encourage people to smoke weed, just like I wouldn't just say go on meds. But what I would say, universally, if you exercise, if you eat well, and you have a really good sleep routine, that's something you should have. Like, I don't think anyone would argue that you shouldn't have those. And then getting into counseling, I think, would be good too. Then you start to get into other like additional things where I think they could kind of be optional. Medications might be necessary for some people. Medications may make some people worse. It may take a trial and error period with medications. So I typically don't just say go on meds, but I also tell people, don't just go smoke weed either,
Right. Hey, cures all cures, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. One method for everything. The ability to escape and to go into alternate realities, and that self-medicated mentality. You have to admit it comes from depriving access and having some type of relief. Like you said, it's a Band-Aid. And once you're no longer high or inebriated, then you got to face the reality that you did not handle or even, considered any kind of help. Now it becomes a burden.
Yes.
It becomes a burden. And I hear that a lot, just smoke weed and you should be fine. And especially, like you said, like barbershops or certain gatherings, even in the club, somebody might say they have an issue or a problem, or they're actually going through something and they have a trusted friend and the friend is talking to them. And the first thing they say, we have this absolute solution to everything. We say, man, just smoke some weed. Or you know what I would do? I drink till I can't think no more. And it's that's not even a solution. You just pretty much numbed yourself for the temporary moment, creating another problem with the problem you did not solve. Right. And now you have a double whammy.
Yeah. And the thing about that process of trying to handle the condition of depression with weed or drinking, eventually you learn it doesn't work that well, or generally it doesn't work that well. But I think a lot of it boils down to depression can come from us infinite number of ways. It can come from biochemistry. It can come from events. It can be circumstantial. It can come from childhood stuff. It can come from being mistreated. It can come from poor diet and not taking care of yourself. It can come from not hearing your inner calling, which I think is a big one. One thing depression sometimes can do is slow someone down to a place where they begin to re-examine stuff because maybe it's correcting their course, and depression is terrible. It's awful. It's debilitating, but there are, I always try if I can to give the possibility or hope that maybe there's some reason also for it, that if you can find some benefit to looking deeper into yourself or to listening deeper to yourself, that maybe you can make something good out of it.
That's interesting. I always thought that depression was normal to a degree because it is a normal effect, normal chemistry. However, how low you stay in there or how long you stay in the low and how long you stay in the high. Most of us don't think about the high in the depression because we often are shown that depression, you're always low. And we don't even we haven't even gotten to the manic side of it, right? So we always introduce to the Eeyore mentality, right? How Eeyore is doing in Winnie the Pooh, right? Yeah. I think so, maybe so, just... It's ironic that he's a donkey too. Highly stubborn, right?
But you know what though? I think I'm just speaking from my experience because, I did have those highs, even though they were very infrequent.
Yeah.
I think the reason I couldn't enjoy the highs is because I know the lows were coming right back, so it was just in that state of misery, I'm going to try to milk this high for what it's worth, but part of me can't even really enjoy it fully because I just know the darkness is going to come back. You know what I mean? And so it was even hard to enjoy the high,
It's hard. It's hard, especially, but most of us don't even know there's a high and low in this. We think it's a straight barrel, Kawasaki style of, depression, but it's a high and low. And persistent depression disorder. What was the other name? Dice?
I think it's dysthymia.
Dysthymia. That particular depression, especially Black and brown men, deal with every day. And you know what we diagnose it with? Oh, he just a jerk. Or that guy is a real a-hole, right? Because he has a downer about everything, or he's negative. But yet he's functioning. And he's literally functioning depression. Some people, they talk a certain way, they act a certain way, but they maintain a certain level. But they just kind of just a little under the radar, but not enough to say they're depressed and not enough to say they are bipolar or, things of that nature. And it's amazing how most people in the city, slums, or just poverty stricken are misdiagnosed and never looked upon as having depression because they are functioning. That double standard thing again. They are functioning. You know what I mean? They're not the classic what we think we understand or know about depression. Like the title, is he dumb or is something something else deeper? And we look at this, and only when they are manic or going through the highs and lows, they will say, "Oh, maybe something's wrong."
It's a good point. And it's sad too, because one, these individuals aren't enjoying the fullness of life and the fullness of their potential. But two, it opens people up to violence and abuse. And,
Yes.
I think I've said this a couple of times, workshops and classes or whatever for the past 2 years is like, man, if we just started in the inner city or any impoverished area, if we just said, let's work on emotional intelligence. We can work on law enforcement. We can work on the school system. We can do all these things. But if we just start with emotional intelligence and counseling and mental health, I think we would see a tremendous change in people's behaviors because they'd have this emotional health and awareness to where a lot of things that kind of pop off wouldn't necessarily happen as much because people would know themselves better. Mm-hmm. They'd know their triggers. They'd know what state they're in. They'd know what to avoid and when to avoid it more because of their state of mind.
Yes.
And it would take a lot. Don't get me wrong. But could you imagine if, 60% of inner city population was like sufficiently emotionally intelligent and healthy and had mental health needs met, what that would do to crime, education, and things like that.
That would be powerful. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think if I recall, Joel, we did an interview on that, speaking on emotional intelligence. It's a powerful tool, and we often forget about our emotions because we speak on spiritual, we speak on mental to a degree, we speak on physical, but double talk it, but we never truly speak on our emotional, especially as men. Yeah. We think it is only the 3 realms, but it's 4. And 4 leads to many others, yes. But these are the 4 main realms that you must keep in balance. And we as men, we drop the ball on this because we emphasize or focus on one of the 4, one of the 3, but never all 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Never all 4. And we find ourselves so unbalanced. We are emotionally disturbed or destructive, or, we self-medicating because somehow smoking and drinking resolve our emotional healing. Whatever that message come from, where did it come from? I don't know. All I know is a big, big misunderstanding, miscommunication, distraction, and it's happening every day. And yet we don't speak on it. We say war on drugs, right? But that's mass incarceration. We say, self-help and mental health, but that involves medication, right? Because they push that more than anything else. We say go to a therapist and talk to a counselor, but don't forget about the medication. It's like it's nothing clear. Everything is always clouded, but we never say, let's speak about emotional intelligence and let us try to heal, one thing at a time versus checking on a mass of problems at one time.
Yeah. Carl, what I love about the spirit of what you're saying is that it's giving people tools to connect with themselves, their mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And because if people are truly genuinely connected with themselves, then they're able better to handle the stresses and the pressures of what builds up day after day, week after week, month after month. But when they don't have that insight, that stuff builds. We all have a threshold. We all have a breaking point. It comes, and then you see different ways of acting out and violence and just bad choices because people are just fed up. They've just had enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In my little small corner of the world, I just try to make it and normalize men being able to express themselves. I know there's, friends of mine from high school or college, or I'm pretty positive there's some men from all those arenas who see me expressing myself and thinking, that's that he coming off as weak, or that kind of sounds like a woman. And it's like, dude, I don't care. Like, I'm not doing this for you specifically. Like, the people who are talking bad about it, I'm not doing it specifically for them first. Like, my primary concern is for the men who are feeling like isolated and are like, they've come to a point to, like, where Joel is mentioning it, like a really healthy self-awareness, or some of those first steps where they're like, man, I really feel like I get great benefit from touching on this realm of my life that I have not done so yet, or haven't done so as often as I should. And so I'm talking to those men first. And then the other guys, hopefully over time, will be like, yo, like, I've been down on this for a while, but I'm kind of opening up to this now. And I think it'll actually be a benefit now. But, in the meantime, it's like, man, I can't really get wrapped up with what you guys are saying, because I've been that guy before. And it's not healthy if you can't fully express yourself as a human being. Like, if you block up and lock up parts of you that's essential to being a human, you're not fully being human, and therefore you suffer more. But I feel like I need to unlock and not block this emotional element and be fully human. And now I can fully thrive,
And Carl, you're building the bridge to those who are looking for the bridge. And that's important, man. That's really important. Yep.
Building that bridge, that healing bridge, right? That bridge of non-judgment, and the bridge of, like you said, being human. Like, it's okay, man. If you feel pain, you can say ouch, right? Yeah, you can say it. You know what I mean? You can express that. It doesn't make you weak. Wow. I mean, I can make this a part 1, part 2. But this is great. This is great. I like the dialogue. I like the chemistry. So I'd like to thank my guests for coming and giving, us the blessing knowledge and the understanding of depression, and the theme, is he just dumb, or is it something deeper? Hopefully this title alone would help you to understand that it's simply not always what you see is the problem. It could be deeper, or it could be he's just a knucklehead. I mean, trials and tribulations and overstanding yourself. Again, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys. And you guys has made my day right now.
Thank you.
I needed this myself. We got to do this more often. Let's not make this a one-time thing.
That sounds great, Ralph.
Sounds great, man.
And enjoy the rest of your day. Stay healthy.
Many blessings, Carl.
Yes.
Many blessings, Carl. Take good care, Ralph.
This is a beautiful discussion. Hopefully you enjoy, and please leave a comment. Don't be shy. Don't shy away. If you have any questions, any feedback, please reach me back at fathatorch.com and join me for the next episode Sunday, streaming live on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. Enjoy and be blessed. Fatha Torch out. Guidance.